So my name's Brad. I'm here representing a lot of the progressive students here at UMich. And I just have to, I wanted to know your stance on trans people as a whole, and then I'd like to maybe have a conversation, a short one about
Sure.
what you believe.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming in and asking a question, Isa. That's great. I mean, sometimes we don't get that. I mean, my stance on trans people is I'd like to characterize this differently. I think that there's a few different categories here, and everybody's lumping everybody together in one category. There are people who have long-standing gender dysphoria, right, or gender identity disorder, right? That's a real active disorder that does exist. Okay, that does not mean that these people are members of the opposite sex. Okay, this is where I reject the argument that if you have gender dysphoria, you have an actual mental disorder under the DSM-5. This means that if you're a man who believes you're a woman, this makes you a woman. You're not a woman, you're a man who believes you're a woman. I have tremendous sympathy for that difficult body dysmorphic condition. That does not make you a member of the opposite sex, because only objective biological reality can make you a member of one sex or another sex. Then there are people who claim to be members of sexes that don't exist, who claim pronouns that don't exist, who claim that they are gender fluid, which is not really a thing or has never really been characterized. There are folks who claim that without any evidence whatsoever that they have gender identity disorder, and that suddenly they discover at the age of 15 that they're gender questioning, but there's not really a persistent level of belief that has lasted for a persistent series of time, and people are being given testosterone or being given surgeries on the basis of this. And then there are people who are intersex, which again is another category. And I think what happens in these conversations, people tend to conflate all these categories. So what they'll do is they'll say, well, trans people exist. And I'll say, okay, so what do you mean by that? And they'll say, well, there are certain people who have Klinefelter syndrome. Okay, those are not trans people. Those are intersex people. That's a completely different category. Those are people who have an actual biological condition. They still happen to be a member of one sex, by the way. They're still sexed.
So far, everything Ben Shapiro is saying is true. And I just want to add one thing as well with all of this transgender issue and this topic going around with the ABCD community. What also doesn't help is people accepting the mental state that they're in. We should treat it as such, as a mental disorder. But for some reason in society, now we just say that we should accept everyone as they are. And the only people they say that to is the people that agree with the ideology of the time, which is the ABCD community's ideology right now in the West. That never helps the situation to just accept them. We don't do that with any other mental disorder, but for some reason these ones, now they're trying to say it's not a mental disorder, it's just how they are. You can change your gender whenever you want, when that's not true.
Secondary sexual characteristics of the other sex. Okay, so that's my general perspective.
Yeah, I think for sake of brevity, I think we'd be able to have a conversation about gender. And I really fail to understand how you claim that there's a lot of genders that are made up, and this is. Could you elaborate a little bit more on that? I think
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think that there's been a false distinction that's been made between sex and gender, and then gender has been read in as more important than sex. So basically, the idea of gender was a concept that was brought up by a college professor named John Money back in the 1960s, and the basic idea is that gender was a set of cultural characteristics that we impose on people of a particular sex. So it's not that women have babies, it's that women are gendered as though they have babies, and this is what makes a woman a woman. Okay, that's not correct. Women have babies. Or we'll say that gender is a series of characteristics that we put, it's a series of stereotypes, essentially. But then you'll see the trans community argue that if a boy has stereotypical attributes of this gender, this makes them a member of the opposite sex, which doesn't make sense. You can have effeminate boys. You can have masculine girls. I mean, this has been a feature of life for all of human history. That doesn't make them a member of the opposite sex. So when people say gender, what I want them to do is define what they mean by gender. If they just mean a set of culturally attributable attributes, and they say that that's completely separate from sex, first of all, I reject that. I think there is a strong correlation between gendered behavior and sex.
Yeah, that's how we socialize children. I mean, I think it's a pretty, the connection's there, and I don't think it goes.
It's not
further.
all socialization is the argument that I would make, and that's backed by the fact that in the primate kingdom, for example, there are heavily gendered areas of behavior. The notion that basically boys and girls when they're born are androgynous widgets, and then we make a boy by giving him a truck and make a girl by giving her a doll, that's not true on any sociological level.
Again, I find it really. So we just clapped for Ben comparing primates to humans. I want to establish that.
No, they did not just clap for Ben comparing humans to primates. His whole point was to say that even in the primate kingdom, animals are not socialized to like certain things between male and female. So this whole idea that males and females, when they're growing up, are wholly socialized to believe in what they believe in, like boys like in blue and girls like in pink, is not totally social.
On top of that,
Well, I mean, I'm talking about the attribute of mammalian biology, so yes. In fact, I will argue, I'll compare human beings to literally any member of the mammalian species when we're talking about sexual dichotomy, which is the basis of all reproduction in mammalian species, yes.
yeah, okay, so, but I do want to bring it back to the concept of socialization in children. I've worked a long time in public schools. I've noticed that students, this gender line that we're speaking of, the binary that you were referring to, I think many of us fall within those two lines, man and woman. I'm not saying it's you either have one piece of genitalia or the other. I'm saying like we have masculine and feminine traits throughout that we pick up from our family, the world around us.
Sure.
Yeah. So again, I'm feeling, if you agree with that.
But that's not what makes you a man or a woman. If a boy likes dolls, that doesn't make him a girl.
Okay.
And if a girl likes trucks, that doesn't make her a boy. And I feel that we're doing grave damage to kids by arguing the opposite.
I think we should allow them the space to explore that. If they
I mean,
like.
by the way,
Yeah.
I don't, first of all, I do think that it is very important to provide rules and rules for kids. I think the idea that kids are to be sort of left out there in the wild and then they do whatever they do, we don't treat them like that with nutrition, we don't treat them like that with education, we don't treat them like that with a lot of things. And the idea of teaching boys to actually embrace their boyhood, I think is quite a good thing. Now, there are exceptions to every rule, and there are kids who are, as I say, boys who will be more effeminate, and they shouldn't be bullied for that or mistreated for that.
Yeah.
But to suggest that this makes them trans or makes them a member of the opposite sex is the thing I'm really arguing against, because that ends in a lie that leads to suicidal ideation, it leads to tremendous confusion, it leads to tremendous psychic pain. You're telling a lie to a kid, and lying to kids is not something I'm very much in favor of.
Yeah, and I think speaking on suicidal ideation, I think maybe denying the fact that like it's okay for a young person to decide if they fall within a certain gender line. I fail to understand how that affects you personally and how that hurts the child.
Right. So anytime society sets a rule, it affects me personally. You're not asking me how a kid in Saskatchewan identifying affects me personally. You're asking me to go along with the lie that kid's personal subjective sense of identity shapes the definition of sex, and that I refuse to go along with.
And that's the thing with liberals. They're trying to tell us, well, if it doesn't harm you, you should just let them be. So essentially what they're telling people to do is go against their morals, because even if you believe that a boy can't become a girl and a girl can't become a boy, you should just lie to them anyway, because it's not harming you. So who cares about your morals and your ideas? As long as they believe what they believe, you should just lie to them anyway. And that's the fallacy that they fall into. So they're telling us to compromise our morals and our beliefs to compensate for someone who lives in delusion, especially kids. And it's absolutely sad that they're saying that kids should just do what they want to do. But if we were to ask them, can kids smoke? Because if a kid wants to smoke, he should be able to. Can kids drink? Because if a kid wants to drink, they should be able to. Should kids be able to drive? Because if kids want to drive, they should be able to. We all know if those same questions were to be asked of these people, they would say no, they can't. But what harm is it doing to you for them to do that? It's their body and their choice, right?
Because as you say, kids are in fact malleable. And the notion that we're supposed to teach all 5-year-old kids that you can be a member of the opposite sex is deeply disturbing, chaotic, and wrong.
Again, and that's not what I'm prescribing. I'd like to be clear that what I'm saying is they should be allowed to explore whatever portion of.
No.
I mean, if by allow you,
traits.
it depends. If by allow you mean, do I think the kids should be like locked in the Matilda chokey for playing with a doll
again,
or something?
Yeah,
no, obviously not. That's child abuse.
Often. Yeah, in very orthodox spaces.
Child abuse is illegal, and it should be illegal. Okay, but the notion that if my kid expresses gender confusion, that I'm not allowed to say to my kid, my son comes home and he says one day you're a girl, and he says I'm a girl, and I say to him you're not a girl, that's biologically untrue, you're a boy. When you're a kid, you're confused in your feelings. The idea that that's a form of child abuse is a lie. That is not a form of child abuse. That's actually how you parent.
Yeah, and again, I'm allowing you that space, but on the other hand, you aren't. You're. opposing the very opposite. You're saying that it's sick and twisted for parents to allow their kids to explore different parts of themselves.
It is sick and twisted to present kids with the notion that boys and girls are not separate in humanity, and that boys and girls are not two separate and dichotomous forms of the species Homo sapiens, and that the idea that there is no biological reality to that whatsoever, so that a boy can be a girl and a girl can be a boy, that is a form of child abuse.
I'll say it for Ben Shapiro, it's sick and twisted to lie to kids that you can become a boy when you're a girl and you can become a girl when you're a boy. It's sick and twisted to lie to children. That's the sick and twisted bit about it. All this exploration, you don't allow kids to do that with a lot of things, but for some reason, we want to start allowing them to explore their gender. And then when they say they feel like a girl, we should just allow them to do it and lie to them of the realities of life. That's what's sick and twisted. Liberals talk about freedom and how they want everyone to have their own individuality, but then they're the same people to tell parents of their own kids how they should be able to raise their own kids, which is very, very ironic.
Same thing as me teaching my kid that my kid can be a horse. My kid cannot be a horse. That is not real. And if I were to teach my kid and take seriously the argument that my kid could be a horse, I'd be doing them tremendous psychic damage. I'm sorry, I feel like we're kind of running out of time here, but yeah, I really appreciate that.
Could I just get one more thing?
Sure, well, go for it.
Again, I'd like to, we're making comparisons to animals, and you're getting a chant for it. And again, it's not my favorite thing.
Yes,
but
because...
but I appreciate your point in saying that, you would be willing to allow another family to let their child explore, certain genders.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't allow a child to explore the lie that they can be a member of the opposite sex.
Oh, there you
but
go.
If they want,
but
if they become, I disagree with the basic idea of quote unquote genders entirely. If the idea, because if you're going to degrade everything down to the behavior of human beings, then we all have our own genders. Literally every single human, we could just have names. We can get rid of the idea of gender entirely, and I can just call you Bob, right? I mean, like we can all have our own. That's the easiest way to do this. We treat each other as individuals with a bevy of different attributes, rather than saying my gender is pansexual, fluid, 45, XYZ, right? Like that's
so dishonest.
How is that dishonest?
No, it's not.
You're making this this straw man about pansexual gender.
No, I mean
name a gender. It is, and you know it is.
So you do it. You name a gender that you think exists outside of male and female.
No, I agree that people can lie within the bounds.
Okay, well, again, I really appreciate the time and the back and forth. I think it is productive, and I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah, no, and again, I don't believe any of you have malice views. I think a lot of your views are founded in the reality of the world. But I hope that you at least would allow yourselves to come out to some of the more progressive groups and maybe have these conversations.
By the way, having conversations like this, I encourage everybody who's conservative to have these kind of conversations go on their side.
That was my intent in coming here. And seeing how hard you guys were on the protesters out there who were using their First Amendment right was really tough to watch, especially for Americans who claim that the First Amendment is something that you co-sign. I'm sorry, but I have to say it.
I wasn't out there, so if anybody was mistreated as a protester, then I apologize on behalf of whoever mistreated a protester.
More than likely, the protesters were probably shouting down how they don't even want Ben Shapiro to be at this. So they were more than likely shutting down free speech while he's complaining about how he didn't like that people were complaining about free speech. But anyway, that was another video, another reaction. As I usually say, if you guys enjoyed the video, like the video as much as possible, comment down below, subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow me on Instagram and Twitter at YinkaThatGuy, and I am out.